This podcast is not sponsored or supported by any business or organization. The views reflected on these podcast episodes are my own. Please be aware I am not a medical expert, travel agent, or any other kind of expert. Hey everyone, welcome to the Eat, Explore, Love podcast. I'm Ashley. This podcast is based off of my blog of the same name, Eat, Explore, Love. It talks about the unique challenges in traveling around the world when you have celiac disease. Due to sort of popular demand, I decided to also record a podcast to delve a little deeper into my travels and the lessons learned along the way. So this was an episode I didn't think I would be recording so soon. As I will explain in a moment, Eat, Explore, Love, the podcast, for the time being, is coming to an end. This has been something that I have been doing on my own for a while, and it's difficult to do a lot of creative ventures on your own. I was hoping by this point I would be able to find someone that could help me elevate this and become a true resource for others. And I know that things like this usually take time, but a lot of things happened this year that when I decided how do I spend my free time, I knew that it was time to put the pencil down, so to speak, on Eat, Explore, Love, the podcast and the blog. Now, that's not to say that I won't pick this up at some other time when schedules allow and when I come up with better ideas. I really wanted to record an interview with my brother and my mother to be able to share from their perspectives, their unique perspectives on having celiac disease, to see how it can help others. And who's to say that I still can't record those and put those on so if people need the resource, they can have it. But this all started because I was traveling the world, and I have shared all the stories from my travels so far, and I unfortunately don't have any additional travels on the horizon, so this feels like a good place to stop for now. But the year of 2024 has not been kind to me. After throwing literally everything I had into building a new life in Europe because of a breakup that completely shattered my soul and my heart and my being, I tried to start all over and be someplace completely new and follow all of my dreams. And I have achieved all of my dreams, just not in the ways I thought I would. And in my typical fashion of how my life goes, it was down the path less traveled. I never do anything the easy way. And it's not because I intentionally make it difficult, but the universe seems to think I need to learn a lot of lessons. But after all of that, I lost my job. The very means I had for being able to live this lavish life abroad. And so I had to come back to the United States and start all over, which was so difficult because the obvious choice of where to go back to would have been New York, where it would have been really easy for me to start my career over. But that hadn't felt like home in a really long time. And I knew that that wasn't going to be the healthy place for me to go back to. So where was the place I always felt safest, where I felt best? And that is with my two best friends in the whole world, my grandmother and grandfather, who I affectionately call Mama and Papa. And again, this was the path less traveled. This was not the way to do it that would be easy as far as getting my debts paid off, getting myself medically back up and running again. This was not the way to do it for my career. But I stuck to my guns. I stuck with my heart. And somehow it's all coming to fruition. And then there was a day where my grandparents and I would talk every single day out on the patio. And one day he looked to me and he said, Ashley, I think you should look to try and go into politics and work on the campaign for, at the time, President Biden. He felt that that was the answer and that was the direction I should go in, that he felt I had a passion and that I had insights to share and things I could contribute to the cause. And I thought he was crazy, but somehow my grandfather is always right. I remember my mom telling me stories about when she was deciding what career she wanted to do, and that my grandfather always told her, you need to be a teacher, that's your calling. And she went into all these other career options. She was a social worker, she was a waitress, she was all of these other things. And eventually she landed on being a teacher, and she said, I should have listened to them probably right from the beginning. And so I had her in my head while my grandfather's telling me this, and I said, I don't know how, but somehow I'm going to work for this presidential campaign, and I'm going to be part of history and part of saving democracy. And that came into fruition in a way I did not expect. I was someone that assisted in producing video content, not for the Harris campaign directly, but I was working for a company that worked on the overflow of all of the video content that her campaign was trying to create. And I spent 3 months working on that campaign, not sleeping, because when I wasn't doing my day job, I would spend my nights volunteering with my grandmother. And it was the most remarkable way I was able to spend my time, in both with my day job and through my volunteering. I felt like I was making a difference, and I was doing everything I could to save our country and salvage the best parts of the American people and the best parts of the America. Because the number one question I was asked while traveling abroad, when people heard my accent, they would say, what are you people doing over there? And as we all know, that did not work out the way I would have hoped. And there are relatives of mine that made it clear that they thought that what I was doing was wasteful and that I should be celebrating. And I did not find that election result to be something worth celebrating. To say I was disappointed was an understatement. And that triggered me into, not triggered in the sense of, how people overuse that word today of the reason why they get upset. It triggered me into going down a new path. So I'm using the term in that context of it jump-started me into going in a new direction. And suddenly working on this blog and working on this podcast, I felt was not what I could do best. I looked on social media and saw all these other gluten-free influencers that were already making such an impact and providing so many resources that were way more helpful than anything I could ever think of. And their minds were just more creative than mine is. I felt like I needed to go more into activism and fighting for equality in a variety of different ways. And when I felt like I have done my job with that, then this would be something I feel I could come back to. So I was already heading in that direction after the election. And what really solidified it was a few weeks later, I was diagnosed with diabetes. And it goes to show, I have spoken a lot on this podcast about the importance of advocacy. That when you go to the doctor, believe that you know your body better than anybody. Because I mentioned to my doctor and said, over the past couple of months, if I don't eat within a certain period of time, I feel like I almost go into what has been described to me as a diabetic shock, where I feel like I'm going to pass out, not necessarily nauseous, but like an uneasy feeling. And it would take so much for me to get my energy back and to be able to feel right again. So she felt that. So when I spoke to my doctor about this, she kind of brushed it off and said, okay, I'll do the standard tests I always do, but I don't really think that there's going to be anything to worry about. And I'm glad she listened, and I'm glad that she did the test, because my A1C was at a 9.4. And if you don't know what that means, your A1C is supposed to be between a 4.5 and a 5.5. And in my research and things that I had learned, I was told that I was near levels of having to get insulin, that I was heading into very dangerous territory. And I was really lucky that we caught things when they did, my doctor was completely shocked that I wasn't showing any of the symptoms that would have triggered, because what I described to her, she felt like could have been attributed to the conditions I had, not necessarily to diabetes. That was not where her brain went when I brought up what I was feeling. And, that diabetes diagnosis, not gonna lie, shattered me. And it shouldn't have shattered me. And so I was wondering, why was I feeling the way that I was feeling? And I realized because there's such a stigma associated with diabetes that if you have type 2 diabetes, it's because you didn't eat well and you didn't take care of yourself and you didn't exercise. And I was functioning at the healthiest I ever have in my whole life. And so I couldn't understand that when I was going to the gym more and I was eating healthier than I have in the past and taking care of myself better than I have in the past, why was I getting this diagnosis now? And I'm thinking it probably was the not sleeping. And perhaps my doctor and I were wondering and pondering, maybe because my body kind of went into a shock coming back into the United States and how we process our food here in comparison to living 9 months in Europe. And my body is very sensitive in that way, so it's totally possible. But when I'm already so limited between the celiac, between my additional food intolerances that I have, on top of having gastroparesis, on top of all my health conditions that limited my diet so much, the diabetes just felt so overwhelming, and that here was another way of limiting my diet. And a lot of people in my family that have diabetes were very confused by my reaction, thinking this isn't such a big deal. But it was a big deal. It was a big, huge change, and one I thought I could have prevented. And that was the worst part of it all. But if you go to my social media, Eat, Explore, Love, or hieatexplorelove, I will post some things that if you have diabetes or other dietary restrictions and you're floundering on what to do, I will provide the apps that have been most helpful to me and the influencers that have been most helpful to me in this process. So it kind of feels a little much to be trying to do all of this and this podcast and the blog and dealing with all the social media. And I feel like my purpose here was to document my adventures. So that way, when I looked back on this time in my life, I could look back and recall it and hear the stories I had to share and the experiences that I learned. And I did that. And so here's to my 2024 recap podcast, like I did last year. And you could go check out those episodes and check out those blog posts. But here's the recap of it all as I say goodbye to you guys for now, because it's totally possible I go on more adventures and share more stories and all these things and pick this back up again. And, I call this Eat, Explore, Love for a reason. I wanted to be able to take this brand wherever my life took me. I felt like eating, exploring, and loving could mean so many different things, not just the gluten-free space. So it's totally possible that I share whatever people feel that they need at this time. So thank you for listening, and now let's get to the good stuff. Okay, so this year was really busy as far as traveling goes because of the way life all worked out. And I can't believe I packed it really within the first 6 months of the year, because the last 6 months I really haven't gone anywhere outside of Wilmington, North Carolina. But anyway, to give you a recap and a reminder, here are the cities I've visited: Berlin, Munich, Istanbul, Leeds, Edinburgh, London, Verona, Glasgow, Lisbon, Palermo, Sicily, Madrid, Barcelona, Vienna, Salzburg, Nice, Paris, but really Disney Euro, Naples, Amalfi Coast, Pietrelcina, Florence, Venice, Bologna, Greensboro, Rome, Santorini, Mykonos, Ephesus, and Capri. So now let's go into my favorite places that I ate at, explored, and the ones that gave me some really tough lessons. Okay, so here are my top 10 cities for eating. I highly recommend that you go to the blog, hieatexplorelove.com, and you see my top 2024 cities for eating. I will have the links to all the different places. So if you want to have some gluten-free eats, you can find the links right away to the places that I ate at and what my experience was everywhere. So Barcelona, my number one, Leeds in the UK, Edinburgh, London, Lisbon, which, oh my goodness, I had ice cream sandwiches for the first time since my childhood, and I couldn't believe it. Palermo, Sicily, Naples, Florence, Bologna, and Rome. Stay tuned for the places where I found most exciting to explore. So for exploring, I hope it really shows how nerdy I am, but I loved Berlin, Istanbul, Lisbon, Palermo, Sicily, Barcelona, Nice, Pietrelcina, and the celiac cruise where I went for the Greek Isles. Guys, gotta do a celiac cruise. To find out more information about those cities, again, check out the blog and find the post, My Top Cities I Explored in 2024. And it will give you the links to all of these cities and why I found it so amazing to get to explore, and the activities that I did and the free tours. All that information are all in those blog posts. So every episode of Eat, Explore, Love, the podcast, when I have a guest that I interview, I ask them the same question. Where's the city that you learned the most about yourself? So go to hieatexplorelove.com and you can find all the details, and I'll try to give a brief summary for each place here. But in 2020, blah, 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 guys, oh gosh, getting all choked up and it's distracting me. Anyway. In 2024, this is a list of the cities where I learned the most about myself. So in Berlin and Munich together, I learned kind of the context of history of the human condition. Germany is a great place to learn that. And that's the same reason why Istanbul is on the list as well. And they're all really deep posts that I recommend you go and read if you're interested. But in the beginning of this podcast episode, I mentioned where my political feelings are. And so much of the number one question I got asked by my friends was, Ashley, you went to Europe and started this journey. Even in 2016, you were ready to get out of here and be like, bye, fend for yourselves. What made you come back and want to fight the good fight and be such a big part of a presidential campaign and want to stay, even though it didn't go the way that it should have, and continue to fight for the rights of all? And it's because of Berlin, Munich, and Istanbul, and the posts and what I write about in there and what I learned there. And Jane Fonda has referred to this period of time as our documentary movie moment, where we look at documentaries of the civil rights movement, of World War II, and often when you're watching those documentaries, you wonder, what would I have done if I was living in that time? And we all like to think that we would be the person that would stand up and help our fellow man. But as we found out in this last election, that's not the choice most Americans made. But I was confronted by a lot of things in Berlin, in Munich, and in Istanbul. And I was confronted with the reality of what it means to make the wrong choice and the impact that has to not choose to help your fellow man. And so to do a quote from Wicked, which everybody's doing right now, so why not me? But who can say if I've been changed for the better, but because I've been to these cities, which is not the direct quotes, people, I've been changed for good. And I hope for the better. Another city on this list is Leeds. I lived a lot of life in Leeds, and I got to experience the most amount of normalcy in Leeds, and I am forever indebted to a city that I never heard of, never would have thought of, never would have given a moment's thought. And I'm so glad that it just so happened to be the place where the cheapest Airbnbs were. And that gave me a couple months of staying there and providing me so much solace. I really loved getting it to be able to be there. Then there's Glasgow, which is the city where I lost my job. And Lisbon, which was the first city I went to on my bucket list few months, where I committed to the idea of making the best out of a crummy situation. And I knew I was going to get myself into some debt, and I knew I was going to get into a lot of financial trouble, but I knew it would be worth it. And I was right. Then there's Paris Disney, where I got to experience my inner child again, and it was the most wonderful thing I could have ever imagined. Pietrelcina is the city where my father's family is from, and from the grandfather I never got to know where his father immigrated from, and I got to meet our cousins, and they showered me with so much love and acceptance without even knowing me. I was forever appreciative of them, and they are truly remarkable people. And the city where I got to learn the most about myself is Verona, the place I was able to call home, and the place where I got to feel free. I'm so devastated that I am not there right now like I'm supposed to be. But I'm so fortunate for the chance that I gave myself, and the chance I gave the city, and the chance the city gave me. this past year has been the worst. Maybe not the worst, but a horrible year in so many ways. But it was also one of the best of my whole life. And I am so thankful. And before I start crying, I'm going to leave it there. But now is time for the wrap-up questions. Okay, so I always ask myself which is part of the reason why I couldn't keep doing this podcast, because I just couldn't hear myself talk anymore. It would be way more fun to have done this with somebody else, but I'm going to ask myself the rapid fire questions that I always asked my guest. So, in my opinion, the city with the best food is, to me, Barcelona. Do I prefer a vacation that requires me to be active or relax? Well, I'm going to give the same answer that so many other people gave. A little bit of both. And where is the city that I learned the most about myself? There's a couple. I'm not going to answer with just one. My first answer before my journey was always London. I think Verona is now on this list. Pietrelcina is on the list. Berlin is on the list. Istanbul is on the list. Bucharest is on the list. And now it's the city where I make my new home, where I have been so fortunate to have my grandparents be the greatest thing that I will ever have in my life, and getting to be part of their social life. And that includes my cousins, Peggy and Tommy, and Rosie now too. And I know Tommy listens to this podcast and has been such a huge support system for me and my grandparents. And I am so glad that I got to meet them, and now I get to live within 5 minutes from them, and they are also the greatest people I will ever know. And I'm so lucky that they let me, my little dorky 29-year-old self, hang out with them, and I can't express how much I love them. And I hope Tommy feels a little special hearing his name on this podcast and knowing how much he means to me. And I'm not going to cry thinking about how much I love my family here and the new family that I have found and built in this time. So that's all, folks. And thank you for listening. Thank you for being on the journey. Nicole, who has been a friend of mine since elementary school, and we have drifted apart, but she has followed the journey, and my chorus teacher, Miss Macy, who has been such a strong supporter, and Phyllis, of course, who is encouraging me to write a book about all of this. And I think I will finish that book just for her to read, just for her. And thank you to everybody else. I really appreciate it. And this is so long for now. And I can't wait until another journey starts and gives me an excuse to record and document, and hopefully it helps somebody else along the way. But till then, till next time. Thank you for joining me this week for all the fun journeys and lessons learned on my big adventure called life. For more information on the different cities discussed, check out the blog posts on hieatexplorelove.com, posted every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. If you have any questions or fun stories to share, feel free to reach out at hieatexplorelove@gmail.com. Until next week, remember to eat well, explore the world, and love yourself. See you next time. This episode is produced, scripted, and edited by me, Ashley. Special thanks to Sarah Mientka.